Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot. I'm Managing Director, Head of Research here at Red Cloud Securities, and I'm delighted to host another Red Cloud webinar on PGEs and uranium today. So we're going to hear from ValOre Metals Management, Jim Peterson, he's the Chairman and CEO, and Colin Smith, VPX. Now, during today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook. Then we'll take as many questions as we can, and we'll type the questions into the chat box. You can type the questions into the chat box at any time. We'll get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. I would forward, during this webinar, this ValOre Metals webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I direct listeners to the forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of ValOre's corporate presentation. That can be found on the website valoremetals.com. For Red Cloud Securities, I'd highlight this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. So please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on ValOre. But before Jim and Colin step up, I would like to say a couple brief words. Bottom line, we still like the potential for uranium fundamentals to drive prices higher. With disinvestment in the uranium sector, there has been a lack of exploration, certainly a lack of uranium discoveries, and new mines will be needed in the coming years to replace mine closures, let alone let alone cover the growth in the uranium demand required. So perhaps these current prices around $48.50 will help. So with that, I now turn it over to Jim and Colin to update the audience on the company. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Welcome, everybody. Today is August 2nd. We're happy to be part of this presentation, talk to Dave Talbot and the audience that Red Cloud has put together over the years. And we're going to talk about the Angilak Property, which is the Uranium Project in Northern Canada, as well as the Pedra Branca Project, which is a palladium-platinum project in Brazil. Before we get started, just to talk a little bit about who we are. If you haven't heard of Discovery Group, ValOre is a proud member of Discovery Group, which is an alliance of 9 public companies. There were more over the last few years, but we've had some real success as a group with finding projects, advancing projects, finding great teams, raising capital, executing our plans, and we've had some great M&A successes as well, including Great Bear Resources, and then recently we had an announcement on Great Bear Royalties. So a really strong group, and ValOre is very proud to be a member of Discovery Group. I'll just briefly go over this slide. As far as the company goes, the 3 points that I like to make here is that the insiders of this company have been very supportive. And over the last few financings, we've actually brought in some very strong institutional investors that seem to be quite interested in actually increasing their position and supporting us. Insider ownership is now roughly 20%. Our market cap, based on today's price, is on the order of 60 million Canadian. And we've got a really strong team, not only for uranium exploration in Canada, but also Brazilian palladium-platinum exploration in Brazil. Very sophisticated group that has done a lot of work in the space over the last many decades. We have a lot of exploration, development, and M&A success. And specifically, we really focus on high-quality exploration programs. Recently, we've had some success with the members of our board and insiders. And the most recent one I mentioned, you can look at the most recent news release for Great Bear Royalties, where Royal Gold has announced a $200 million bid, cash bid. And in this marketplace, obviously, that's water in a desert for many investors. So we're quite excited about that. And we've had lots of success. So we urge you to go to our website and communicate with us if you'd like to hear more about that. Today, we're going to focus on the 2 projects that we have in the company, the flagships. So we have the Uranium Project in Canada called Angilak, and then the Palladium-Platinum Project in Brazil called Pedra Branca. The common theme with both of these projects is that we look for projects with substantial prior investment. So that would be in the form of exploration for the most part in Canada. And then in Brazil, there's, in addition to historic exploration expenditures and expenditures by ValOre from an exploration perspective, there's also a lot of really fabulous and helpful regional infrastructure and investment in roads and power lines and water, ports in nearby cities, airports that really help in terms of project development and future development. In addition to that, our group always looks for really big projects that have district scale potential and that have a lot of mineralization across the large land packages, so that if we do our job right, which is adding value through exploration, we will advance the project to a point where a senior mining company will come in and take the project over from us at a accretive price. That's sort of the goal with the companies within our group, and specifically with ValOre. This we're going to launch right into the Angilak property, which is located in southern Nunavut territory in northern Canada. There's actually a lot of activity that's happening. If you look on the left-hand image on this slide, it's a very mining-friendly jurisdiction. There are uranium deposits in Nunavut, and we have a large land package, which is almost 60,000 hectares in scale and size. We've put a lot of money into it, building on a significant amount of money that was spent by previous operators. We have one of the highest grade resources. So I'm just going to click right here to show you where it is on the property. Let me just see if I can do that. So this area alone on the project is called the LAC 50 trend, and there are 5 zones there that host over 43 million pounds of 0.69% U3O8. It's one of the highest grade deposits, uranium resources in the world, and it is the highest outside of the Athabasca Basin. So we have a large land package, significant exploration, and a lot of exploration upside. And with that, I'll pass it on to Colin.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, so what we're looking at here is a long section of the 3D block model for the LAC 50 resource area. This resource in particular was calculated in 2013. And as Jim referenced, it's very high grade. And what you're looking at on the section line, that's surface. So that black line that's going horizontally across the page is surface. And so this thing is drilled to surface and drilled down to a depth of about 380 meters vertical. And you'll see the different colors denote the different grades or percent of U3O8. The scale or the legend for that is in the top right. And so anything red is a percent or higher. And you can see a lot of those high grade shoots that have this sort of plunge going to the southwest or to the bottom left of the page. Those are still open at depth, but we're really focusing on finding shallow pounds. And so marching along the structure, we will be drilling some down dip holes, of course, in the core program that just started up. But you know, it's compelling that we're able to drill these structures from surface and have high grade at surface as well. So the resource itself is very well constrained with over 60 kilometers of drilling in 335 holes, and there is expansion potential quite nearby to the strike openness of the resource. So you see a red arrow denoting the J4 West. That's a target that we drilled in the RC program this year, had some really quality hits, and we're following that up with the core program as well. And the scale bar you can see just below the block model is 5 kilometers approximate strike length, and significant openness, as I said, along strike. So to the next slide we go. So this is a summary of the 2022 RC program. We drilled a little over 3,000 meters, and our hit ratio in terms of strong radioactivity, which we deemed over 500 counts per second or higher, was about 81%, so 22 of the 27 holes. Now, what you're looking at in this chart or table, you can see there's 3 targets that we drilled: Dipole, Yat, and J4 West. And the holes, each individual column represents a drill hole. And then the purple dots, it's sort of akin to the gram meter perspective in the gold space or PGM space, where gram per ton intercept in a drill hole multiplied by the thickness in meters represents a gram meter value. So a 10 gram per ton interval over 10 meters is a 100 gram meter hole. This is exactly the same, however, using the scintillometer based radioactivity. So the assays are still pending for this. We expect to receive them actually quite soon, the first batch. But this is a good indication of potential mineralization. So the higher the radioactivity, the better chance of there being uranium there, of course. So in summary, the larger the purple dot, the better the intercept with respect to radioactivity and or thickness. And the vertical scale there you're seeing is vertical depth. So the top being surface, the bottom of the page being about 190 meters. And you can see that most of the intercepts are actually within the top 100 meters and or right at surface, as shallow as 7 meters. And you'll see as well within each column, which represents one drill hole, each column, there's multiple zones. So, there's oftentimes, in the case of dipole, which is, literally on the other side of the basin from LAC 50, there's multiple intervals. So upwards of 4 or 5 zones in a drill hole. And we actually just released the first core hole with respect to scintillometer radioactivity today, or was it today? I believe it was.
It was yesterday late at night, so went out this morning. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and with the RC, we're targeting shallow structures. You can only drill so deep with an RC rig. So we're following that up with the core rig as we speak. We have 2 core rigs working as we speak now. And the first hole we released is drilled from this pad right here. So pad 2 underneath at a steeper dip, holes 001 and 002. And we hit a really nice zone at about right about here in vertical depth that was 12,000 counts per second. And then another one at about 100 meters depth that was just shy of 10,000 counts per second. So that's the strategy. Again, sort of march along these structures with the RC and then follow up at depth with the core rig. But, with that said, we're only seeing as deep as 190 meters on this image. So this is still really shallow as far as uranium goes. We're not drilling through 300-400 meters of overburden or basinal cover. We're drilling right at these targets at surface.
Yeah, and before we go on to the next slide, this is the first time we use that previous image. So if you have some comments on how it might be made more understandable or visually appealing, I mean, the whole thing we're trying to get across is we're hitting radioactivity very near surface and multiple zones down to very shallow depths, which is quite unique in the space. So that's what we're trying to convey with this image here, and we hope we nailed it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Colin. And this is from 2013, but one of the big question marks with projects typically is metallurgy. So we ran a number of tests, which several news releases will go over it if you go back almost 9 years to when we had the project and we were quite active. But effectively, the extraction was high percentages and rapid leach kinetics, so and low reagent consumption. So all the things you want when you're looking at a project in the Metallurgy 4 project. And, it was described as an attractive yellow cake project by someone who knows what he's talking about, Chuck Edwards. So we're quite relieved with that. We were at the time anyways, and we've sort of checked that box off, but we will continue to do metallurgy in all the different zones as we advance them, just to improve our knowledge and reduce risk. Colin, take it from here.
Sure. Yeah, so this is a little summary page on the exploration program that is ongoing at Angilak this summer. We completed, as I said, a little over 3,000 meters of RC drilling, testing 3 targets. So you can see those denoted on a whiteboard here. So the dipole target being here, YAT here, and then the other one we tested, J4 West. We're going to do a little bit more work at HOT before drilling it, and we like the results so much at these 3 targets. We went no further. And in addition to that, within the red hashed area, that's the approximate extent of the ground Vlf coverage. Ground Vlf is actually highlighted on the top right panel here. You can see this is ground Vlf here, this panel. And it really lights up these structures that host uranium mineralization as these magenta lineaments. And so, in the case of LAC 50, which you're seeing here, it really it lights up these structures. The next logical step for us is to run our orthogonal soils across these structures, and it really highlights which part of the structures are most mineralized. And then we step down, dip, and drill it. So we're really expanding upon that methodology throughout the district. And so we've expanded greatly, actually doubled the current VLF coverage. And most of that is on the western block, which is much less explored versus the east because of LAC 50. And then further to that, we're running collecting about 1,500 soil samples, enzyme leach soils, which represents the middle panel of data you see on the right side there. And then, yeah, we have 2 core rigs that just started up. So we're engaged in a 4,500 meter core program that will be focusing just on dipole and J4 West. So dipole being the target with multiple stacked zones, and then J4 West is immediately to the west of the J4 ray uranium deposits, which comprise about 15 million of the 43 million pound resource. And we had a couple of great hits in the RC program, over 22,000 counts per second, which stacks up among the better holes in the actual resource in terms of counts. So we like what we see, and we'll be following that up with the core rig this year as well. And you know, to showcase the district scale potential, there's been about 300 holes drilled outside of the LAC 50 resource area. And as you see in the bottom right, I don't know if it might be hidden by our ugly mugs there, but over 77% of those returned anomalous radiation. Oh, perfect. Thank you, whoever did that.
Moved our ugly mugs.
There you go. I like it. And then over 57% of those returned counts per second values of over 1,000, which typically translates into good uranium mineralization in assays. So it's exciting, and you know, the first assays are coming out shortly for RC, and we're excited to get those to market right away.
Sure. Yeah. So before we jump into Pedra Branca news flow, which I'll talk about at the end again, but RC assay results, and then we're drilling with 2 rigs right now. So very active and exciting program. Okay, we'll now fly from Canada all the way down to Brazil. Just to give people an idea, if they haven't heard our presentation before, the Pedra Branca project is a palladium-platinum project in Ceará State, northeastern Brazil. When you fly in, you land in this airport in this big city called Fortaleza. You have your choice of highways to get down to our large land package. In the city, just outside of Fortaleza, there's a couple ports, a commercial deepwater port here. And the town from which we base our operations is called Capitão Mor, which is located down here. You know what? I was moving my cursor, but actually you can't see that, can you? So in the left image at the bottom left, there's some white blocks. And I'll just click right here. This is where Capitão Mor is in that area, and the large land package. Thank you very much, Colin. So we'll move now to the next slide. Large land package denoted by, on the right-hand image, by the gray lines. It follows a large ultramafic unit, which we call the Troya unit, and that's denoted with green. And then Colin will get into the specific information on the different zones, but we're pretty proud. We've just increased the resource by about 100% from when we acquired the project. We're building on a lot of expenditures by previous operators, up to about 35 million US. We've spent 6 million Canadian over the past 3 years. So very cost-effective exploration, and it enabled us to almost double the resource. We're actually just over double the resource to just over 2.1 million ounces, almost 2.2 million. Take it from there, Colin.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so, you know, and one of the things that we always found quite compelling about Pedra Branca was the shallow nature of the mineralization. And so, you know, it's great from a targeting and exploration standpoint, because very conventional exploration techniques are very effective, like soil sampling, trenching, geological mapping, RC drilling, and of course, a tool that we've sort of dusted off from the shelves at Pedra Branca called the Trado, we'll get into in the next slide or two. But every single one of the 7 deposits that are currently in the inferred resource are originating at surface, and then they have varying dips. But in the case of the one we're looking at here, which is the Esparo deposit, it's about 400,000 ounces. And what you're seeing, again, the surface trace being the black line, and the PGE assays, PGE plus, so palladium plus platinum plus gold in grams per ton summed together, is denoted by the blue legend there on the left-hand side of the image. And so this deposit is at surface. The strip is essentially would be essentially nothing. And we actually drilled this Esparo last year for resource continuity and metallurgical sample material. And some of the highlight holes you can see on this map, for example, ES15C on the right-hand side, 77 meters of just shy of 3 grams per ton from surface. All these intercepts are indeed from surface. And, you know, within that right-hand drill hole, for example, there was a 7-meter interval of just shy of 18 grams per ton at 30 meters depth. So we're really getting underground caliber intercepts at or near surface. And as I said before, this is the case with all 7 of the deposit areas. They're highly expandable. And further to that, we've been really busy this year developing new drill targets. So property-wide, we've got 4 or 5 targets, which we have now advanced to drill-ready stage. These are targets which we have not drilled as a company, but with the drill program, we deem them very high caliber resource candidates. And this is how we're doing it. So it's, as Jim said before, there's been an extensive historical spend on the project. Anglo-American Platinum was one of the majors that had a big impulse of capital and work to Pedra Branca. And so they spent the lion's share of the $35 million at Pedra Branca. So we're really scouring that data and using that to guide us in terms of additional targeting. And so we get to the field, fundamental boots on the ground geology and prospecting. And a tool that I mentioned before is the Trado Augur, and that's really become a cornerstone tool for us down in Brazil. And you can see a picture of it actually on the left-hand side there. And it's basically, I've spoken to this before, it's basically a four-stroke Honda engine mounted on top of a steel frame, which rotates drill rods, and ultimately there's a 4-inch diameter auger drill bit on the bottom. And we're able to drill through the full overburden cover down to our deepest hole to bedrock has been about 20 meters in depth. They can reach 30, but we haven't had cover that thick to date. But we get a really quality geochemical sample on a meter to meter basis. And then further to that, we actually get a sample of the top of the bedrock under cover. And so we typically, after mapping and prospecting, do a tight fence of Trado holes. We get assays from that. We follow up with really targeted trenches. And then at that point, with a positive trench, we're ready to drill. And so, as I said before, we've got 4 or 5 targets we're really excited about. We haven't drilled them with the core RC rig yet, but the trenches are great. The Trado guided us there, and we've bought a second Trado, and we're using that property-wide.
I just want to make a couple comments. Go back there if you don't mind, Colin. Sure. Big difference between bringing in drilling contractors from outside the project area, several drills. Definitely a much more expensive way of deploying exploration capital. One of the things I really like about both the Trado and the trenching is that we can use local talent, and we've really built up the skill set and capacity of the people that live in Capital more. We're building crews that can rapidly get out there, just basically pile it out of a truck and get almost immediate samples back. And they, of course, know when they hit the ultramafic unit, we don't know what the assays will be until we send them to the lab. But both with the trenching and the Trado, it's very rapid response and very quick and very cost effective. So I think it's been a real step change this year in terms of the productivity, in terms of the exploration, and it really showing the massive upside that this project has of near surface mineralization. And we can't wait to test it later in the year with the drill rig. Case in point. Yeah, and here's kind of the full story in a target called Ipueiras, which is again a target that we haven't tested yet with the core or RC drill, but we employed the methodology that Jim and I were just explaining there at this target, and this is where we're at today. So the first pass was again a detailed geological prospecting and mapping, and followed up, that allows us to really delineate where these ultramafic belts are located. And the mag is a good guide for that too, because these things are quite magnetic. And so using that as a guide, we're able to trace the ultramafics. And then we followed up with those blue traces, which are representing the Trado Augur holes. And so you can see, 8 meters at 1.13 grams, 8 meters at 1.29, 4 meters at 1.06. So they're all running. And so when we have a positive Trado fence or line, then we typically follow that up with the trench. And one thing that's worth noting as well, a Trado is not an RC drill or a core rig. It cannot drill through competent bedrock. And so when you see an 8 meter interval at 1.13, it doesn't mean it's closed off at 8 meters depth. It's still open at depth. It's just the Trado gets stopped in its tracks because the rock's too hard. But it is able to drill within into the sort of weathered, fractured tops of the bedrock. And so that's what you're seeing here. So subsequent to these Trado holes, the assays received from these, we ran this trench or excavated this trench. The assay interval speaks for itself. We followed up with another several trenches to the south of this, which also ran. So this is a target that is drill ready. It's got expansion potential outside of the current trenching, but ultimately, there's, as I said before, 3 or 4 other targets just like this in which we've brought to this stage of maturity, and the next step is drilling. And so, in combination with the arsenal of targets like this that we've advanced over the course of this year,
in addition to the openness of the existing zones that are in the current resource, we really like the upside on the resource point of view. And, the thing that's always been compelling about Pedra Branca as well is that there's the full maturity of targets. There's full green fields, ultramafic belts, which haven't been mapped or sampled at all. And then there's resource expansion targets where you're literally stepping out and hitting pretty low hanging fruit. And there's everything in between. So we're able to really utilize this methodology at all stages of that pipeline, whether it's greenfields, target development, or, SIN drill program, drilling, Trado work, or delineating ultramafics undercover. So excited for that next drill program for sure. Back to you for the catalysts, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, sir. So obviously very, very active at Pedra Branca, not drilling right now, but really advancing. And you'll see that we've had lots of news releases from a Trado and trenching perspective, and we'll have a lot more of those. The team is very actively moving certain zones forward through their work. Stephen, you've asked a question in terms of PEA. Definitely working towards to do that in the back half of this year. And that'll be based in probably not more drilling, but the work that we do on the metallurgy will inform us in terms of the PEA and putting together an economic picture there. But certainly we'll have a lot of drilling to do at the back half of this year and into next year, which will go to perhaps add to a future pre-feasibility study. Very actively working on the project and also advancing things on the metallurgical front as well. So over the next couple of months, we'll have lots of news releases there. The work that over the last few years allowed us to cost effectively double the resource, and we see a runway to do much more damage on the resource growth over the next 2 years at a very low budget. In terms of in Northern Canada, the Uranium Project, we're right in the midst, as we announced today, we've got 2 rigs pounding holes into a pretty productive target. And we have news release hopefully coming out in the next week or two, which is encapsulating or the initial results, at least from our RC program that we have completed that Colin went over. So lots of going on. In terms of our strategic review, it took us much longer than we thought to kind of get our sea legs and get the communication going. But now our Canaccord has really picked up steam and the communication is out there. They're talking to a lot of different people from companies that may or may not be interested in our uranium project, doing a deal, some sort of transaction on our Canadian assets, and also the palladium-platinum projects in Brazil. So basically just polling the marketplace to see how we can maximize value. The thing that we'll do for sure is unlock the 2 assets from one another to hopefully add a lot of value for shareholders. Dave, I can see the questions on the right-hand side. Do you want me to kind of walk through some of them?
Hi there, guys. I've got them sort of arranged in fashion. So why don't we, if you're done, we can get right to the Q&A portion.
Let's do it. And we know there looks like somebody has several questions, so we can attack now.
Yeah.
Where are these questions?
Just on the right-hand side, Colin. You kind of look on the right-hand side of your screen.
There it is. British.
That's okay, guys. Don't worry about that. I'll take care of them here. So you did spend some time today talking about the Discovery Group, and which you're a part of, and that's had some fantastic success. In fact, I've covered a couple of those companies, including Great Bear in the past. I also got involved with Kaminak because of ValOre's Angilak Project, which before the spin out into Kivalliq. But maybe give us a sense of how being part of that group is beneficial to your exploration and your focus.
Well, we wouldn't have Colin, for example, if we didn't have a group, because the reason why that's a great example, because somebody who we do a lot of business with and other companies in the group, and also ValOre, knew Colin from a previous life and made a recommendation that we should meet him. And I think that's a very good example of how our platform, the group, allows us to attract excellent people, super high caliber people. And those people make great decisions and also have great contacts themselves. They provide credibility when we're raising capital. They put together great plans or exploration plans, so we are able to execute typically on budget, and that allows us to advance projects. And then as far as the group goes, I think the fact that we've had lots of success allows us to attract the attention of bankers and other companies that want to do deals or provide us with an opportunity, let's say, to in terms of project flow or project ideas, M&A ideas. So Great Bear was really a rocket ship that surprised everybody for sure. We didn't plan that. We can't take credit for that, and that was all Chris and Bob and the Great Bear team that formed around them specifically. But in the early stages, certainly I think we were really helpful for them. And then John Robbins stayed very involved going forward. And so we do have this platform that allows economies of scale in terms of purchasing power for, let's say, geophysical equipment or drilling contractors or big soil sampling campaigns. We're able to negotiate because we're not just one little company. We're kind of a bigger group. High quality people are attracted to us. Project flow comes to us more readily. Capital comes to us more readily. Ideas are sent to us in terms of M&A. So we really benefit from the group. And then in terms of how it helps us, I mean, access to great people, capital, and the ability to do deals will of course help ValOre. And we're moving this thing as fast as we can. You know, we did announce a strategic review, but as you can see, we're not slowing down at all in the exploration on the two projects. We're hitting a lot of mineralization on both projects, and we're trying to convey that to people. We are hitting shallow, high grade mineralization on both projects as we speak.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned economies of scale. So cost synergies, obviously, with respect to the exploration company. You know, do you share offices? Are there back office personnel you share? Ways you can save that way as well?
Yeah, we do. We have effectively the group has a full floor in downtown Vancouver, and then a lot of other people don't live or work in Vancouver, so they're kind of all over the world. But there's a basis of operations there, so the companies will share that, and then share reception and a boardroom and a photocopier and all that. And that's an important thing. But that, you know, we're not in the business for admin. We're in the business for exploration and upside and deals. So I think that you certainly save money in marketing. So we were able to hire really high quality marketing people to brand the group and help the individual companies. But really, it's not about saving. It's rather having more impact as a group. That's really what we're shooting for.
Okay, so you know, ValOre, it's definitely a unique vehicle. You've got both platinum group metals projects and uranium projects, and either of them could support it.
Perhaps. And, you know, it's taken a little bit longer for us to get things done. And so a lot of the flow through dollars that we raised way back in November now will be spent. And one of the reasons why I didn't want to spin it out in the first quarter of the year were that we raised the flow through dollars and we couldn't port them to a new vehicle. Obviously, we've spent that money on drilling now and will be spent within the next few months. So, you know, that could be something we could do. I think, though, that from a pure structural perspective, separating the Brazilian asset is very easy. It's a 100% held subsidiary of ValOre. It's got its full team and admin. It's got a project. So separating that asset makes sense. And then what format that asset takes, yet to be seen, whether it's a sale or a listing. Certainly a project and a team that deserve funding and a lot more capital so they can kind of strike out and be unlocked from the Uranium Project. But the Uranium Project, frankly, has way more interest. There's a lot of interest in what we're doing, not only from retail investors, but from other companies. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the interest is there. There hasn't been a single company that's interested in the whole kit and caboodle, though. So we know that retail investors want it separate, and people that are looking at doing deals don't want to buy both projects. So, right, you know, it's pretty obvious what we need to do.
Okay. As far as potential buyers go, are they looking to buy the project outright? And let's assume the Uranium Project outright. Would somebody be interested in looking for a partial interest that maybe lets you value the rest of it? Would, you know, sort of have the market catch up to what somebody else, a strategic, might think it's worth?
Like, you mean earning it at a project level, buying an interest in the project?
At a project level. If they were to buy, say, 10% at 20 million. I'm throwing a number out there. Let's not, you know, not assuming anything, but you know, if they bought in at X million, 10% interest, then maybe the project is worth 10x.
Sure. Well, we you know, that hasn't been presented to us yet in any form. But if that were the case and the metrics were attractive, I think we'd look at it. We have the ability to do something like that. Like we don't have to do. We're not beholden to any kind of structure. So I think really what it comes down to is if we're going to do something like that, it's got to be a substantial amount of capital to deploy to really advance the project, not just to sell an interest just for some cash. I think it needs to be significant enough that we kind of have a step change up in the work that we can do that can add the value, so they could win, an incoming party could win, and so could our shareholders, which is first and foremost on my mind.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Jim. So why don't we start talking about assets with your PGM project, Pedra Branca. You doubled your resource to 2.2 million ounces of PGMs this year, had another very positive 8,000 meter drill program completed. You know, what did this recent, I guess earlier this year, this drill program teach you about the project? What did you learn?
I mean, I think it corroborated what we always felt about Pedra Branca, that it had extensive resource upside that was yet to be discovered. And further to that, you know, with the development of this exploration methodology, we've gone ahead and greatly grown that potential, I think, district-wide. So, you know, the historical work was a great guide and is a great guide for us, but ultimately we've taken that and are now running with it with this these Trado Augurs, and able to conduct very cost-effective exploration at a very rapid pace and advance numerous drill targets. And, you know, as Jim alluded to earlier, there's so much infrastructure in place. There's two highways actually that run adjacent to and or through the project area. There's roads, a network of roads that literally goes everywhere. It's like a spider web across the whole project, and electrical lines in place. And as Jim said before as well, you know, a very supportive local community, which isn't always the case globally. It isn't always the case in Brazil, but this is an area of Brazil that's quite arid. It's been heavily developed agriculturally, and over recent years, drought has really affected that income for a lot of these folks. And so this project has always been a really supportive, you know, opportunity for employment. And so, and one of the things that's been very well fostered over the years through all the different companies that have had this project is a very healthy relationship with people in Capital More. And it's been, you know, they're wonderful people. It's very, very safe. They're very, very supportive, and they want to work. They're always asking for jobs, and we're able to sort of bring them on and actually see them progress upwards in the company. So it's been a great story there.
Okay. And just to dig a bit deeper into the auger program you just mentioned, and forgive the pun there, you're accelerating use of auger drilling both in Brazil and in Nunavut. So are you using this for more than reconnaissance work, you know, looking for discoveries, or is this the key that allows you low cost exploration as a targeting tool ahead of RC drilling?
Yeah, we haven't yet used it in Nunavut, Dave, but it is a tool that we feel would work up there. But it's been a tool that we've just used at Pedra Branca to date. But that may change next year. We might bring one or two up to Nunavut. But yeah, I mean, it's a tool that really can be used at any stage of the target pipeline, and so it can be put quite easily in the back of a pickup truck. It's not expensive or complex to repair or to run maintenance on. And we get, as we said before, real-time inferences into geology undercover. And then subsequent to that, we get these really comprehensive meter by meter geochemical samples downhole that help, obviously, when you're planning a drill program. And when we're able to follow up the Trado with trenching, and we get a good trench, I mean, that's a very low risk drill target. If you've got a good trench and you know the geology and the structural orientation, you know, you step down dip of it and you drill it and you hit probably. And so, you know, further to that, it is a tool as well that we can use during a core or RC drilling program. If, for example, we've lost the ultramafic intrusion in the hole, we can do a quick 2 or 3 day Trado fence. And back in the case of Massa Pay, which is a deposit that we newly added to the 2022 resource. That was a Trado-driven target. So we really delineated this ultramafic belt with the Trado. Subsequent to that, we trenched it. And so since then, we've actually gone ahead and extended the Trado coverage significantly to the south and have further mapped this intrusion a good ways. But it just showcases the potential and the power of the tool, as I said, at all stages of the targeting pipeline, Dave.
Okay. You've got 7 resource areas now, PGM resource areas. When might you anticipate another update? What sort of exploration do you need to do before then?
We need to drill in the back half of the year. And I think one of the things that we have been doing, it's a bit of a slow burn in terms of drilling, but the Trado and the trenching has been advancing, at least our knowledge of the shallow mineralization. So we've got at least 3 targets that Colin was referring to that we've got fabulous Trado results, which are near surface, and then the trenching corroborates that. The next thing to do is obviously drilling. And I think we're going to lay out a full pipeline before we bring the drills in. And that would make sense to do it the latter half of this year. So we'll have no resource growth until we do more drilling. And that could be, Q4 of this year and into Q1 of next year.
Okay. So if we're expecting maybe let's assume that the resource comes after that, what sort of timeline would you expect to wrap economics around the project, put out a PEA? And
I think we can do in advance of that. I mean, the jury's still out. We're going to get the metallurgy back here soon, and that will help us because that really, I don't think that there's any kind of fear that we won't find more mineralization. So the growth potential is there, but to wrap economics around it truly, you have to have a flow sheet. So we're going to have to figure out from the metallurgical perspective how we're going to attack all the different deposits across the project. So that's the critical thing. And then from there, I don't think we'll get caught in a trap where people think, well, there's just 2 million ounces, there's no more to find, because I think we'll be able to really hammer home to people consistently finding new mineralization at surface and new zones and really growing that. It's pretty obvious that there's a lot more to find. Yeah.
Anything interesting that you might put in a PEA, maybe all open pits or rhodium or nickel production or, anything else? Is it too early for that?
Rhodium. Colin has a better idea probably of the actual percentages and grades, percentages of samples taken that had specific grades on rhodium, but it's something that we didn't focus on. It's considerably more expensive to assay for rhodium. So, I think at this stage it's a palladium-platinum project with some kickers down the road in the form of rhodium and nickel, if we think that they'll have a huge commercial impact.
Okay. Yeah, and we did, we resampled. We were the first company to assay for rhodium at Pedra Branca, mostly because of the cost, as Jim said. It's, double the cost of a single assay for the full analytical suite. All that said, we received assays up to 1.44 grams per ton rhodium. The average of the 1,000 odd samples that we reran was about 0.07 grams per ton rhodium, which sounds low, but actually is in the rhodium world a fairly notable return. So any of these metals that we deem to add value to the project will be looked at, of course. But the real value is, of course, in the palladium, in the platinum, and so those are the main focus for sure.
Okay. So to answer somebody's question here, timeline for bringing Pedra Branca into production, we're still early days on this project. It's you don't even know if you've got the best stuff in front of you yet, right? You're going to be
but it does dovetail with the email. The question about from Stephen, which is on the PEA. So Samantha has a question there on the timeline for bringing Pedra Branca into production. So PEA first, then pre-fees, then fees. And, the PEA, if it was done, it would be really wrapping economics about what we know right now in terms of the inferred resources that are defined. And then, of course, all the information that we can gain on the flow sheet and the access and the local infrastructure, those would be important pieces of the puzzle. But what we'd be doing as a company or at a project level anyways, the entire time is trying to find more. So the next pre-fees would unquestionably, we'd be shooting to have a larger resource base. So I'm not sure whether that would change where those ounces might be found, if they're all near surface or something that we'd have to go underground, or if they're just very near surface, open pittable, what the metallurgy is like for the different deposits. All that stuff will affect the next iteration, let's say, of the economics. But either way, as it stands right now, what we deem to be most important are moving the metallurgy forward and finding more mineralization and growing the size of it. So it's a scale that's significant and material, not seen as small, but rather it's early stage and something very big and meaningful material that we're advancing through near surface exploration.
Right. Okay. Any color on getting financial support from the state, like South Atlantic Gold has managed?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that this particular person, I think, is also a contributor online to certain different websites, and it was noted and discussed online. And just to relieve you, our team on the ground also saw that and has good relationships with those people that are necessary in the state of Sierra. We haven't made it a priority yet to have that similar type of financing, but we'll be having meetings the balance of this year.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. So let's shift our attention here to uranium a little bit. You've got over 43 million pounds along that LAC 50 trend, a large resource at 0.7%. It's amongst the highest grade in the world outside of the Athabasca Basin, but there are no resources below 400 meters. So do you think it's more beneficial to extend some of these higher grade resources to depth, or do you think it's really step out along trend and look for things along J4 or Ray, or even further out, Yat and Dipole?
Well, that's a good question. And there is a question there on Dipole and how does it compare? The scale on the western side there in terms of the geophysical anomalies and some of those geochem anomalies are substantially as big as or substantially bigger than the LAC 50 trend. Like, they're monsters. So we feel like testing it as we did at LAC 50 makes a lot of sense. Near surface exploration, if you're successful, the future development potential is it's less expensive to develop a shallow ore body, but also just in terms of exploration, the difference between a 500 meter hole and a 100 meter hole in terms of gray hair for the management team, costs and time frame are significant, because drilling a 500 meter hole takes substantially longer than 100. It costs way more, and if you miss, it is seriously disheartening. So it is always good to test at depth for that kind of haymaker, like a Hail Mary, drilling at depth several hundred meters down, and if you hit, everyone gets excited. But I'm also a believer in steady success, marching along, and actually be able to clearly say to people, we're hitting high grade, we're hitting radioactivity, and in the past we've hit high grade uranium from very near surface down to a very manageable depth. That, from a commercial perspective, makes a lot of sense to me, and my ability to communicate that to the market.
Yeah, this is the first time you've actually started drilling this area in 6 years. So I think you are focusing on a couple of these areas without resources. So you did put dipole core results out today, scintillometer results, some good counts there. Can you give us your best assessment how you view this target? Let's say maybe compared to your initial views that this might be another LAC 50 trend to the west?
Yeah, truly an analog. And the difference is that it is on the western side of the block, which has seen significantly less exploration and focus in comparison to the east. And so it's still a very early stage there. And one of the big focuses of the spring this year, when we could mobilize the crews and snowmobiles across the lakes on ice and whatnot, was the ground VLF coverage. And that really shows, it gives the first perspective into the potential regional upside of a target like Dipole, which had existing ground VLF, which was collected and used in the drill targeting back in 2015. But we've since expanded that in, about 25 kilometers along strike, and collectively coming out from the main Dipole zone. And the conductor that's associated in the magenta lineament that's associated with the high-grade hits from the 2015 core program and the RC program from this year and the ongoing core program, that extends for about 9 kilometers to the northeast. And so if you recall that one image of the 3D block model of LAC 50, that was about 5 kilometers from east to west, more or less. So to, total blue sky upside, we're looking at a structure that's potentially double in strike length. And, we know we have high grade uranium in drill core. We really like what we saw in the RC program and so far in the core program. And further to that, the geochemistry, which we alluded to before, the enzyme leach soil samples, which are collected perpendicular to the structure, those are among some of the highest tenor soil assays in the project database. And they're open in both directions along strike associated with the conductor. So that's exactly what we want to see as explorationists. We want to see the geophysical signature there. We want to see a soil anomaly that's associated with that geophysical signature. And, we don't have soil coverage going the full 9 clicks of this newly mapped conductor, but certainly in the coming years, hopefully next year even, we'll be expanding upon that this year for sure. But from an early stage geophysical perspective, it very much so has potential to be double LAC 50 if it's mineralized throughout the full strike length of that conductor.
Okay, so it looks a lot like LAC 50. Does it look the same or better than what you remember from the core of 2015?
Don't answer that, Colin. He's trying to trap you. I'm an old man. I know this.
Slippery slope there. Yeah, no, but
I just give people what they want. So.
And we want to do the same. But it's as I said before, it's an analog. The zones are the same. It's they're these tuffaceous, this brecciated, strongly hematized and graphitic tuffaceous units, which are within these broader packages of basalts, which is what you see at LAC 50, which is what you see in the 2015 core from Dipole, and it's what we're seeing so far in the core this year at Dipole as well.
Great.
What I like though is that the news today, what I love is the stacked zones. So, if you have a narrow tabular body, just one zone, the ability to build resources is limited to that one zone. But if you have multiple stacked zones, you got to remember that within these zones, the tuffaceous unit that Colin's referring to, the mineralization will ebb and flow. The concentrations, the grades, the widths of the veins within these units ebbs and flows. So, but to have multiple zones that have the potential of that mineralization, and then we hit it like we did, it's very exciting. And these are very shallow, so we're going to continue to drill at depth. We're going to continue to drill along strike, and we've got that image that Colin showed that sort of shows those purple blobs from very near surface down to 190. I mean, think about that. These are all along strike. These are very shallow hits. You stack us up against anybody in the basin where they're hitting, some guys are hitting at 700 meters. So this is 109. This is from 7 meters. Yeah. So we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, that was an interesting figure that you showing mineralization at Dipole, Yat, J4. Each column showing a hole, almost like an oil and gas or ISR uranium log. So, I think it does show good depth correlation between the holes. Might it be demonstrating that this is flat lying mineralization as opposed to vertical, which then you'd expect to hit at various depths? Should we assume this is stacked flat lying mineralization?
No, it's not flat lying. No, they're like zones that are like this.
Okay. So, is there any horizontal component that we can see between each of the holes? Or right now I'm assuming they're ordered just by hole number, right?
Mm-hmm. And pad.
Excuse me. Several zones from each pad. Those 9 holes were drilled from 4 pads. And you can, there's basically these planar bodies that connect across the whole target breadth, and so we expect to see that in the core assays and RC assays as well.
Okay. Is there any need to extend drilling deeper at this point to see if mineralization extends at depth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll be the 2 or potentially 3 down dip pads that we'll drill. We'll be following up the best looking RC holes. And so, mind you, I mean, we're stepping, call it 80 to 100 meters down dip, and the vertical depth of where we anticipate the interval to come into the core hole at is still shallower than 200 meters depth, sort of thing. So this is still very shallow in the uranium space, as Jim said, and you know, with knowing that, there's absolutely room to further step down dip of those holes. Probably not this year, but if we really like what we see, and if you can remember the 3D block model again, there is this sort of well-defined plunge to the high-grade chutes that takes on about a 70-meter dip, and it goes sort of a long strike. It's within, if you imagine a book, and you took a paintbrush and you painted a red line at a 70-degree dip down the book. That's kind of what you see mineralization-wise in these structures. And so you can add a lot of pounds by stepping down dip and following one of these plunges if you're within it still. And so the RC program was great because we were able to march along, sort of identify where we think some of those plunges might be. And the core drilling will really help to further test those at depth.
Okay, no, sounds great. So we're coming up to top of the hour, so maybe let's close off with an ESG question here. Obviously becoming much more important, or increasingly important, I should say. You know, nuclear power, uranium have been known as green energy sources, but regarding the social aspect of ESG, you know, how do you go about enhancing your community relations with NTI and First Nations and Nunavut? You know, how important is this to management at ValOre?
It's hypercritical, but those are sort of lumped. You know, NTI is a corporate entity, you know, and then you've got the local communities. So I think that they're different, and it's all important to us. So the community visits, we meet with multiple organizations, not just NTI, and then we meet with NTI because they're, you know, they literally have a business partnership with us on the project. So it's hypercritical, and the best we can do at this point is communicate openly of what we want to accomplish and what we're doing, and be completely transparent on that. Keep them updated. Make sure that if they have any concerns in all the different communities, which could be very different concerns depending on the community, and you know, we address that, and that they're getting comfort based upon what they're hearing back from our project, what we're doing and how we're acting, and the activities that we're undertaking. And you know, obviously jobs are important as well. So as much as possible, as things ramp up, different jobs become available at site and in the communities, and we will attempt to make sure as many locals get employed, not necessarily from all over Nunavut territory, but the more regional communities around the project. And so that, I think that's very critically important. And then in Pedra Branca, it's exactly the same, Capital more, but it's a little different down there because it's a very developed town that's very close to the project area. So there's medical clinics, and you know, we're trying to build capacity in the community. You know, the Trado is a totally different thing. People can be, you know, they can go home for dinner at night. That's totally different than Nunavut, where you have to stay in a camp. So it's a very different way to interact with the community. But in both cases, we're obviously trying to help them improve their capacity, improve their lives, and be honest and open with them.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you very much, guys, and well, let's wrap it up there. So thank you, Jim and Colin, ValOre Metals. Thank you, everybody else, for tuning in. Reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back tomorrow afternoon. Colby Kushner is sitting down with Brad Ahead Lithium tomorrow. That's August 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you.